Let's talk about the most expensive case of indigestion in human history. The date is the 22nd of May 2010. A programmer named Laszlo Hanyecz is sitting in his house in Florida, and he is hungry. He goes onto an internet forum and makes a strange offer. He says, "I will pay 10,000 bitcoins for a couple of pizzas, maybe 2 large ones, so I have some left over for the next day." A British man on the other end of the internet accepts the deal. He orders 2 Papa John's pizzas for Laszlo. At the time, those 10,000 bitcoins were worth about $41. A fair trade. Everyone was happy. Fast forward to today. Those 2 pizzas are now worth over $1.1 billion. Let that sink in. 1.1 billion. That is not a typo. That is the GDP of a small island nation. Laszlo ate the equivalent of a modern aircraft carrier for lunch. He literally chewed through generational wealth with some pepperoni and extra cheese. If he had just kept his digital wallet shut and eaten a sandwich instead, he would be a billionaire today. But here's the part that drives everyone crazy. Laszlo did not pay with gold. He did not pay with diamonds. He did not pay with shares of Apple or Google. He paid with computer code. He paid with a string of numbers that do not physically exist. You cannot hold a Bitcoin. You cannot put it in your pocket. You cannot use it to stop a wobbly table. It is invisible. It is intangible. And yet, the biggest financial institutions in the world, the same banks that laughed at it for a decade, are now fighting each other to buy it. So, what exactly is happening here? Are we looking at the future of money? Or is this just a mass hallucination that we all agreed to participate in? How can something with zero physical presence be worth more than a house? To understand why people are willing to sell their souls for this invisible coin, we have to strip away the hype. We have to ignore the crypto bros with their Lamborghinis and the angry politicians screaming about regulations. We need to look at the cold, hard mechanics of the machine itself. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Before we even look at Bitcoin, we have to look at the money currently sitting in your pocket. Go ahead, take out a dollar bill, or a euro, or whatever currency your country forces you to use. Look at it. You probably think that piece of paper represents value. You think it represents your hard work, your time, and your sweat. You are wrong. That piece of paper is a promise, and promises are very easy to break. For a long time, money was actually backed by something real, like gold. If you had $1, you could technically walk into a bank and exchange it for a specific amount of shiny yellow metal. But in 1971, the rules changed. The government decided that gold was too restrictive. They wanted the freedom to spend more than they had. So, they cut the link. Overnight, money became what we call fiat currency. Fiat is a Latin word that roughly translates to, "let it be done." It essentially means, this paper has value because we say it has value. And if you disagree, men with guns will come to your house. This gave the central banks a superpower. They acquired the ability to print money out of thin air. Imagine you are playing Monopoly, but the banker is allowed to grab a handful of extra cash from the box whenever they are losing the game. That is exactly how the modern economy works. When the government needs to pay for a war, or a pandemic, or a bailout for their friends on Wall Street, they do not ask you for more taxes. That would make you angry. Instead, they just push a button. They print billions of new dollars and inject them into the system. Here is the conversation that happens behind closed doors. The government says, "We spent too much money and we are in debt." The central bank says, "Do not worry, we will just print more money to pay the debt." You, the regular citizen, ask, "Wait a minute, if you print more money, doesn't that make the money I saved worth less?" And the central bank replies, "Exactly. But we call it inflation, so you do not realize we are stealing from you. This is the silent robbery. It is why your grandfather could buy a house with a few years of salary, while you have to work for 40 years just to pay off a mortgage for a shoebox apartment. The numbers on your paycheck might go up, but the value of those numbers is constantly going down. It is like trying to fill a bathtub while someone is secretly drilling holes in the bottom. You are running on a hamster wheel, running faster and faster, but you are not moving forward because the ground beneath you is moving backward. This was the state of the world in 2008. The banks gambled with everyone's money and lost. The system was on the brink of collapse. Trust was broken, and in that moment of absolute chaos, an anonymous entity named Satoshi Nakamoto released a document that would change everything. The year 2008 was not a good time to be an optimist. The global financial system was having a heart attack. Lehman Brothers, a titan of Wall Street that had survived the Civil War and the Great Depression, evaporated overnight. People woke up to find their retirement accounts cut in half. Houses were foreclosed on. Jobs were slashed. The masters of the universe in their high towers had gambled with leverage they did not understand. And when the bill came due, they turned to the government for a handout. And they got it. Trillions of taxpayer dollars were pumped into the dying banks to keep them alive. It was privatized profits and socialized losses. If you win, you keep the money. If you lose, the public pays for your mistake. In the middle of this burning wreckage, on October 31st, Halloween night, a ghost appeared. An email was sent to a cryptography mailing list by someone calling themselves Satoshi Nakamoto. To this day, nobody knows if Satoshi was a man, a woman, a group of people, or a time traveler sent back to save us from ourselves. Satoshi did not ask for funding. He did not pitch a startup deck to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. He simply released a white paper. It was a 9-page technical document titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The timing was not a coincidence. Satoshi was angry. We know this because of the very first block of Bitcoin ever mined, known as the Genesis block. Inside the code of that first block, Satoshi hid a secret message. It was a headline from the Times newspaper, dated January 3rd, 2009. It read, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." That was it. That was the mission statement. Bitcoin was born as a protest against a system where a few powerful elites could decide the fate of your money behind closed doors. The radical idea was simple but terrifying to the establishment. What if we could build a currency that didn't need a bank? What if I could send value to you directly, like handing you a $20 bill, but digitally, without Visa or PayPal or a government intermediary checking our ID and taking a fee? Before Bitcoin, this was impossible. If I send you a digital photo, I still keep a copy of that photo on my computer. Digital things can be copied infinitely. That is the problem of double spending. If I can copy my digital money, I can spend the same dollar a million times, and the system collapses. Banks solve this by keeping a private ledger. They are the referees. They look at their spreadsheet and say, okay, Alice has $10. She sends 5 to Bob. Now Alice has 5. We trust the bank to keep the score. But Satoshi asked, what happens when the referee is corrupt? What happens when the referee decides to freeze your account because they do not like your politics? Bitcoin solved the double spending problem without a referee. It replaced trust with mathematics. When Bitcoin launched, it was silent. There was no marketing campaign, just a few geeks running software on their dusty laptops. But the design was genius. There was no central server to shut down. If the FBI wants to shut down a company, they raid the headquarters and arrest the CEO. But Bitcoin has no headquarters. It has no CEO. It has no physical address. It lives on thousands of computers scattered across the globe. To kill Bitcoin, you would have to shut down the entire internet. It was the financial equivalent of a hydra. Cut off one head, and 10 more appear in basements in Russia, in cafes in Tokyo, and in dorm rooms in America. The genie was out of the bottle, and the banks were too busy counting their bailout money to notice. So, how does this invisible money actually work? How do we know I have Bitcoin if I cannot hold it? The answer lies in something called the blockchain. Now, do not let that word scare you. It sounds technical, but it is actually very simple. Imagine a giant, shared notebook that everyone in the world can see. Every time someone sends a Bitcoin, a line is written in this notebook. Alice sends 1 Bitcoin to Bob. Dave sends half a Bitcoin to Sarah. This notebook is the ledger, but unlike the bank's ledger, which is locked in a vault, this notebook is public. Every single person who runs the Bitcoin software has an identical copy of this notebook on their computer. Here is the magic trick. Because everyone has a copy, nobody can cheat. If I try to write in my notebook that I have 1 million Bitcoins, the thousands of other computers on the network will look at their notebooks, see that I actually have 0, and they will reject my claim. They will essentially say, "Nice try, liar," and kick me out. This is what we mean by decentralized. There is no boss. The network is run by the consensus of the majority. It is democracy in its purest most ruthless form. But who writes in the notebook? Who turns the page? This is where the miners come in. Again, forget the image of men with pickaxes covered in coal. In the Bitcoin world, mining is actually guessing a number. Imagine a giant lottery. Every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin network creates a complex mathematical puzzle. It is like a combination lock with billions of possibilities. The miners are computers that are frantically guessing numbers, trying to crack the code. Millions of guesses per second. Guess, fail, guess, fail, guess, fail. Why do they do this? Why do they burn massive amounts of electricity just to guess a random number? Because the winner gets a prize. The first computer to solve the puzzle gets the privilege of writing the next page of transactions into the notebook. And as a reward for their work, the network gives them brand new, freshly minted Bitcoin. This is the only way new Bitcoin is created. It is not printed by a government committee. It is awarded to those who secure the network. Critics love to scream about the energy usage. They say Bitcoin boils the oceans, but they miss the point. The energy is the shield. By forcing miners to spend real money on electricity and hardware, the network makes it impossibly expensive to attack. If you wanted to hack Bitcoin, you would need to control more computing power than all the other miners combined. You would need more electricity than a medium-sized country. The cost of the attack would be higher than the profit you could make from it. It is a fortress built of pure energy. And then there is the most important rule of all, the supply cap. This is the antidote to the inflation we talked about earlier. The Bitcoin code has a hard limit. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. No more, ever. It is written in stone, or rather, in code that is mathematically impossible to change. Once the last Bitcoin is mined, roughly around the year 2140, the supply stops. Compare that to the US dollar. In 2020 alone, the US printed nearly 20% of all dollars in existence. That is infinite supply versus absolute scarcity. When you buy Bitcoin, you are not just buying a digital token. You are buying a share of a finite pie. You are betting that a system based on strict, unbreakable mathematics is better than a system based on the whims of politicians who want to get re-elected. It is the first time in human history that we have a commodity that is strictly limited. We can find more gold if we dig deeper. We can build more houses. We can print more dollars. But we can never, ever create the 21 million and first Bitcoin. That absolute scarcity is what drives the price. When demand goes up and supply stays flat, the price has only one direction to go. Now, before you rush out to mortgage your grandmother's house to buy Bitcoin, pause, take a deep breath, because here is the ugly truth that the influencers on TikTok won't tell you. Bitcoin is violent. It is not a savings account. It is a mechanical bull ride inside a hurricane. If you buy Bitcoin, you have to be prepared to watch your money evaporate. History is a brutal teacher. In 2011, Bitcoin crashed 99%. In 2013, it crashed 80%. In 2017, it crashed 80% again. And just recently, in 2022, it fell from $69,000 down to $15,000. People lost their life savings. Marriages were destroyed. The media cheered. Every time Bitcoin crashes, the headlines are the same. Bitcoin is dead. The bubble has popped. It was a Ponzi scheme all along. They write the obituaries with glee. But then, something strange happens. The dust settles. The tourists leave. And the network keeps running, block by block. Tick-tock. The price stabilizes, creeps up, and eventually, it smashes through the old record high to set a new one. It is the Rasputin of finance. You can poison it, shoot it, and throw it in a frozen river, but it just won't die. This resilience is the only proof that matters. A Ponzi scheme relies on new victims to pay the old ones. When a Ponzi scheme collapses, it stays dead. Bitcoin has crashed and resurrected itself 4 major times. That is not a scam. That is a volatile asset, finding its price discovery in real time. And this resilience has caught the attention of the very people who used to hate it. This is the biggest plot twist in the story. For years, the CEOs of Wall Street called Bitcoin rat poison. They called it a tool for drug dealers and money launderers. They warned you to stay away. But watch what they do, not what they say. Suddenly, the tone has changed. BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, the company that practically owns the global economy, applied for a Bitcoin ETF. They are not just buying it, they are packaging it up and selling it to pension funds. Fidelity is mining it. Banks are quietly opening trading desks. Why the change of heart? Did they suddenly believe in the ideals of Satoshi Nakamoto? Did they suddenly want to liberate the people from central banking? Of course not. They smell fees. They smell money. They realized that their clients want Bitcoin, and if they don't sell it to them, someone else will. The suits have entered the chat. This validates Bitcoin as an asset class, but it also brings a new danger. The rebels built the technology, but the empire is now trying to colonize it. The volatility might go down, but the soul of the project is being tested. We are moving from the era of the Wild West to the era of institutional adoption. The outlaws are being replaced by auditors. This is the double-edged sword. Institutional money brings stability and massive price potential. We are talking about trillions of dollars of capital that can now legally flow into Bitcoin, but it also means that Bitcoin is becoming part of the system it was designed to destroy. The question is no longer, is Bitcoin a scam? The question is now, who will own the majority of the 21 million coins? The banks or the people? So, here we are at the edge of the cliff. You now know more about money than 99% of the population, including the guy managing your retirement fund. But knowledge is useless without action. I am not telling you to buy Bitcoin. I am not telling you to sell everything and live in a bunker. That is not what we do here. At Arca Insight, we do not peddle hope, and we do not sell fear. We sell clarity. The financial world is designed to be confusing so that you stay poor and obedient. We exist to hand you the decoder ring. If you want to understand the games being played with your livelihood, and if you want to be the one spotting the bubbles instead of the one trapped inside them, hit that subscribe button. Join us. We dissect the noise so you can hear the signal. Ultimately, the story of Bitcoin is not about computer code. It is a story about trust. For thousands of years, human civilization has run on trust in leaders. We trust the emperor not to clip the coins. We trust the king not to steal our land. We trust the central bank not to debase our currency. And time again, history shows us that this trust is always, eventually, betrayed. Humans are greedy. Humans are emotional. Humans make mistakes. Bitcoin offers a different path. It asks a simple, radical question. What if we stop trusting humans and start trusting mathematics? 2 plus 2 is always 4. It does not matter if you are rich or poor, left or right, the code does not care about your feelings. It does not care about wars or pandemics. It just runs. Every 10 minutes, a new block is born. Tick-tock, next block. It is the steady heartbeat of a new system beating underneath the chaos of the old one. You can ignore it. You can hate it. You can fight it. But you can no longer pretend it does not exist. The exit door from the fiat system is open. Whether you walk through it is entirely up to you.